This is the Hagmann and Hagmann Report for today. It is Thursday, November 28th, 2013, Thanksgiving Day here in the United States. I'm Doug Hagmann, co-host, but flying solo tonight. Usually my son, Joe Hagmann, is with me, but tonight you're about to hear the program, 3 hours of tonight's program, unbiased, uncensored news, information, analysis by me, Doug Hagmann, flying solo. Our home base, HomelandSecurityUS.com. Folks, you're listening, I believe, to the only show where we present the news to you in 3D. And we try to get to the bottom of things by looking well beyond the headlines, the bylines, to bring you the news behind the news. And that's what we're going to do tonight. I'm going to give you some background here. I think it's extremely important. This is truly going to be a fact-filled show tonight. This is what I'm going to try to do tonight is connect all of the dots with respect to what is taking place right now in the world today. And I hope everyone had a great Thanksgiving, by the way. I cannot believe just how much we have to be thankful for, even in these times of uncertainty. But I was talking with a friend of mine today, and he said for all that's really going on, for all that's bad, it certainly could be much worse. If you have family to share the holiday with, if you've got people that you feel close to, that you can reach out and contact by email, by phone, in person, then you've got it really better than many people. And we often hear too the fact that people say, well, God has abandoned us, and He hasn't abandoned us. You know that, we know that together, of course. And the people who say that really don't understand. They don't get it. We may have abandoned Him, but He certainly hasn't abandoned us. And we have to remember that. But I just want to say thank you so much for joining me tonight. And perhaps toward the end of the program, we'll throw open the phone lines and to talk to you, hear what's on your mind, and let you weigh in on a few issues. Hopefully we can somewhat stay on topic tonight. Of course, those of you listening to this, if you're preparing for Black Friday shopping, wow. Well, if that's the case, boy, good luck with that. Last year we saw the people bowling over other people, and I've got to tell you, I in my spirit, my heart, I believe you're going to see a much more aggressive approach by people this year. And the reason for that, of course, is the debasement of the dollar. The dollar buys less today than it has in the past. And people are running much shorter. Many people are anyway. If you're the average person, you're really running short in your monthly expenses. Money doesn't go as far as it used to. Well, that's by design. And ultimately, for the demise of the American dollar, the target, of course, is killing of the dollar. A couple of notes here before we get into the real meat of the program. The first note is, I understand that the audio last night, was pretty bad on BTR. If you go to Christians United Broadcasting Network, well, actually, if you go to our YouTube channel, now CUBN is not operational tonight, but if you go to our YouTube channel, which is accessible on the bottom right-hand side of our front page of our website, you can hear the show uninterrupted without the, from what I understand, and I try to go through all of it. I couldn't go through all of it today, but our show from last night, you can hear it without the distortion. Now, one thing I will do, ladies and gentlemen, is I'll put the one particular call from the intelligence insider that we had call in. I'll isolate that and put that into a separate sound file and try to upload that separately, perhaps either via YouTube or whatever format is the best. The other thing I want to tell you, and this is something that it's important because as we feast here on Thanksgiving and look at a table perhaps full of food or perhaps not, it doesn't matter. But if you are thinking if you are thinking about your preparations and what you need to get ready for really the bumpy road ahead. I had spoken with our sponsors, American Survival Wholesale, earlier, right before the broadcast, and they said, people are the White Wednesday sale that went on yesterday and ended at midnight. A lot of people were ordering after that the sale expired, and of course, our sponsors, being the kind-hearted and generous people they are, and understanding that people are really in need of good deals and good prices, have said, because of the way our program is structured, because of so many of you listening to this through archives instead of live, and we've got just tens of millions. I think, folks, the last number was like 62 million downloads this year. It's an incredible number. But having said that, our sponsors, American Survival Wholesale, are going to take that White Wednesday sale and extend it through the weekend. Now, I'll tell you, I wouldn't wait much past midday Sunday, whatever time period or whatever time zone you're in across the globe. I really would not wait much beyond that. They said they would extend it to the end of the weekend, Sunday at midnight, but because of the fact that many people are traveling, they're on vacation, they're uploading or downloading the show late, so this will give them a chance to take advantage of the specials. So please do that. It's incredible. I've never seen prices like that, lower prices like that, or as low with the. It's just a fantastic way to save money. But I do hope that everyone had a wonderful Thanksgiving with their family. If you're here in the United States, or if you're still partaking in the festivities. Thanks for tuning me in tonight. But if you did catch last night's program, we talked about the Iranian situation, how things are setting up there. You know that we allegedly or ostensibly had this agreement or entered into this agreement with Iran. And from that, of course, is depicted on Drudge, peace in the Middle East and that type of thing. And people think, wow, it's interesting how this is playing out. Well, of course, my intelligence source yesterday had spent about 45 minutes explaining how things are shaping up. And that's the first part of the program. The second, that and along with talking about Obama is going to be the first part of the program. There's something very important that I want to talk to you about with respect to Obama that actually goes back into ancient Roman times. Now, that's relevant to today. By the way, before I get more into this, I do want to pass along a note here that to our listeners that had me distressed today. Larry from Buffalo, a good friend of the show. You folks know him from his presence in the chat room. Larry from Buffalo is hospitalized in the cardiac care unit in Buffalo. Folks, if you don't mind, please say some prayers for Larry. He's in very bad condition. I hope perhaps to be able to see him here in the next day or so. Travel to Buffalo, both Joe and I perhaps, and to see him. But please say a few prayers, because he's a very, very good friend of the program, very great patriot, very great. He's just a great man. And I say a prayer for him, Larry, and his wife, please, because it is he's not doing too good. And he's a young guy, too. Young guy. Younger than me, I think. He's got a lot of heart issues. How things are shaping up with respect to, and I'm going to try to, I'm going to try not to bore you here, but there's going to be a lot of information. So if you're listening to this on archive, or if you're listening to this to get the information, go ahead and feel free to take notes, because this is going to be a program I think that you're going to want to take a lot of notes or remember this. or somehow have read a reference to this. And by the way, to those joining me live, although my presence might show in the chat room, I do not communicate in the chat. I just don't do that. I cannot. I don't know how Joe does it. I cannot do that. I do communicate during the show by email, and that's all. Folks, what we're seeing take place today is a geopolitical, very strategic realignment. Again, the intelligence source from yesterday had set this up. This is extremely critical to understand, vital for you to understand. Through this ostensible deal, or ostensibly through this deal with Iran, which is really no deal at all, what we're seeing taking shape is an alliance between Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Israel, and China. That's right. Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Israel, and China. That's on one team. The other team is Syria, Turkey, Russia, and Iran. Now, to put it differently, Russia, Syria, Turkey, and Iran, or Russia, Iran, Syria, Turkey. The reason I mentioned that the second way, the Russia first, is if you look on one side of the board, one team is headed by China, the other team headed by Russia, and you've got strategic alliances that are developing. So under Russia, you can cite Iran, Turkey, Syria, and under China, in China's corner, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Israel. And if you remember from last night's program, the intelligence insider said, well, Qatar, they're not mentioned, but right. Qatar, Qatar, whatever you want to call it, in the process between, well, from the Benghazi situation through the negotiations with Iran and throughout that whole period, Qatar dropped out, or was the odd man out, pushed out through this game of musical chairs. And now the United States perhaps might be, because of everything we've done, the anger that we have cultivated with our allies and with our enemies alike. Think about this. The United States has alienated both its allies and its friends across the globe. They've alienated Saudi Arabia. Call them a friend. I don't think I'd do that. We've certainly alienated Israel. Who can trust us? If you were an enemy, certainly you couldn't trust us. And now if you were a friend or are our friend, you certainly wouldn't trust us or this government that we have. And speaking of this government, what I'm going to get into next, I believe, is extremely critical. I believe is perhaps one of the most critical things that we could talk about ever, at least with respect to current events. I've got to tell you, I'm afraid. Well, concerned. I'm concerned at what I'm seeing take place. And this is exactly why I mentioned, that's me, Doug Hagmann, flying solo, taking a couple of unscheduled breaks, or an unscheduled break, and I will be doing that throughout the course of the program. But as the program unfolds, again, we have a very serious situation developing, not only in the Middle East, not only with the alliances taking place that seem to be conforming to some sort of agenda. I believe it's an agenda. But we also have Barack Hussein Obama, Barry Soetoro, in the Oval Office. And, you know, I often say to you folks, we were all born for this time and this place, and we all have a mission, we all have a duty to, well, a divinely appointed duty, I believe. And in saying that, then doesn't it stand to reason that so does Barry Soetoro and Barack Hussein Obama, whatever name you want to ascribe to him? Well, I believe that's true. And in my studies of Barack Hussein Obama, Barry Soetoro, in my research of this man, I've got to tell you, I echo the words of the gentleman you heard last night. I believe, as he does, and I believe that Obama is perhaps the ultimate of ultimate slaves, the ultimate stooge, somebody being used, and I'm not sure he even knows who he is. Here's what I want you to think about. Again, this is through my research, independent of anyone else's. And I have all the books. I've got the books by I've got the book by Dr. Jerry Corsi and others, Aaron Klein, about Obama being a Manchurian candidate. We could tick off all of the information you already know, but let's not do that tonight. Let's get into what you may not know. If you look at his history, of course, you do know, or I'll tell you now, that from his grandparents forward, there has always been an element of control appearing to exist within or by the Central Intelligence Agency, what is now known as the Central Intelligence Agency, of course, after World War II. That's what it developed into. The Dulles brothers. There appears to be a grooming that has taken place of Barack Hussein Obama for this time and this place and for this position of power. Well, you know, if you look back in history and you look back at 9/11, and people will say, well, 9/11 was an inside job, and they will say that there were criminal elements within our government that perpetrated this for the purpose of course, you know, getting us into war, and have all of these other these carnal secular reasons for the events of 9/11, which is fine. I do believe that 9/11 did not happen the way the government said it happened. I do believe that there were criminal elements within our government that were complicit in the events of the attacks of 9/11. But having said that, not too many people touch on the spiritual component of this, the occult component of this, and I would urge you to look up the definition of the word occult when I use that word in this context. But I'd like you to open your minds up for a moment here and think about this, because for as much as it might sound like I'm jumping from one topic to another, for example, 9/11 and ancient Roman type of activities and Obama and the Middle East, I'm going to tie it all together in this program. Because you see, if you look at what happened on 9/11, and if you understand how our calendar changed, and of course the elements, the spiritual elements and occult elements working behind the scenes, in my view, there is a tremendously significant argument to be made that 9/11, that September 11th, was in fact the true birth of Jesus Christ. Now, if you take that, hold on to that thought for a moment, and you might say, well, no, it wasn't, or yes, you know, but there is ample evidence, I believe, that based on the alignments of the planets to give a particular focus to a day in 3 BC that would indicate that the planetary alignments and other things would line up with the historical accounts of the Bible. So let's go with that for a minute, and let's just think about that for a minute. If 9/11 or September 11th, 3 BC was Jesus Christ's birthday, if that's when he was born, then what was 9/11 all about? Well, that was to pervert, among other things, for other reasons, that was to pervert the birthday of Jesus Christ. And we're coming into the Christmas season now, so this is relevant in that regard as well. If you think about this, what better way by the occultists, by the Luciferians, by the Satanists, by the people in power who believe that they are above everyone else and they are royalty. What better way to pervert the birth of our Savior, our Messiah, than to create this blood sacrifice? And if that's the case, so what is? So what about Christmas, December 25th, that the world celebrates the birth? Christianity, the world of Christianity celebrates the birth of Jesus Christ on December 25th. And how does this relate to Obama and everything else? Well, think about this. 9/11, or December 25th, was the birth of Jesus was not celebrated until the second or third centuries, sometime in the second or third century. And it began, and I'm not going to get too deep into this. You can research this, but the actual birth, or the actual Christmas, the celebration of Christmas, or the celebration of Jesus' birthday, was tied to the festival, the ancient Roman festival of Saturnalia. That Saturnalia is an ancient Roman festival in honor of Saturn as a god. And this festival was held, if you look at the Julian calendar, from December 17th is when it began through December 23rd, and then later on it ended with a birthday of the unconquerable Sun, S-U-N, on December 25th. But the way it ended, as a matter of fact, is significant. The way this Saturnalia Roman festival ended was extremely significant, is extremely significant, because, and I believe this is where things come in terms of Obama, perhaps, and what we're seeing today. The festival of Saturnalia, if you look at the historical context, there was a king, the king of chaos, and I'll just leave it at that. It's more complex than what I'm actually going over, but rather than really bore you with the very detailed aspects of this, there is a very malevolent aspect to the festival of Saturn, or Saturnalia. One is a human sacrifice. Now, like, this is truly Luciferian in nature. You see, if you look at the Tations, there was a period for 9 days. There was this king, or this election or selection of a lord of misrule, a king who was elected out of the group of Romans and forced to indulge in carnal pleasures. And really, think of a turkey being fattened up for an ultimate sacrifice. And that sacrifice, in the context of Saturnalia, occurred at the end of the festival, which would be the 25th day of December. I bring this up because if you look at the pagan history surrounding Christmas, and if you think about this in the context of today, what are we celebrating today during that period? We're celebrating, in essence, we are celebrating Saturnalia, the festival of Saturnalia. Now, I'm not going to even get into the aspects of should you celebrate Christmas on December 25th or whatever. That, to me, is not important. That is a personal decision that you would make and would have to make. I'm looking at this from the context of current events. Well, how does something that was based in antiquity, ancient Roman antiquity, how does such an event affect current events? Before he retired, Pope Benedict XVI had written a book, actually a series of works, Jesus of Nazareth, the infancy narratives where he states that December 25th really has no basis in historical fact. In fact, Jesus was born in Pope Benedict XVI's eyes much earlier and on a different day and in a different season than we celebrate on Christmas. Well, that's all fine, well, and good. Well, now there is indications, or there are statements made by the Pope that really we don't know when he was born, but I contend, based on all of the open source research that I've found and some very good research, that there is ample evidence to show that he was born on September 11th. And again, it relates to the perversion of Jesus Christ's birthday. 9/11 does. But how does this all connect to Obama and what we're seeing today? That's kind of what I want to know. Is there some current contextual argument that could be made with this ancient ritual, knowing that the very people who celebrate this are the very people who are the power brokers behind what's going on? Well, I think that we can connect some dots here. Let me fast forward to the other day. On November 19th, this just, 9 days ago, there was a posting on Facebook. Folks, I don't know whether you saw this or not. It was posted under the Christian American Patriots Militia. I believe Steve Quayle had this as a headline or a link, where someone by the name of Everest Wilhelmsen made a Facebook posting under the heading, or as a representative of the group Christian American Patriots Militia, where he stated the following. Now, these are his words, not mine. And I'm quoting: "We now have the authority to shoot Obama, that is, to kill him. His willful violations and alienation of our Constitution, constant disregard for our peaceful protests, and corruption of all three branches of government, i.e., rogue and illegitimate government, reveal the dictator that he is. Obama and his co-conspirators disrespect our Constitution, constitutional rule of the law, and abuse the American people. The authority to kill Obama comes from the Second Amendment of our Constitution. He is levying war on the United States and aiding and comforting our foreign enemies. The Second Amendment gives us the right and duty," and in parentheses, he has authority, "to engage an enemy of the United States that does so with the design to reduce us under absolute despotism. I would be very surprised if Obama does not leave Washington, D.C. today." And then in parentheses, he writes November 19th, "never to return if he is not dead within the month." And then, of course, in all capitals, he says, "Please join us at," and pay very close attention to this name of this group, Christian American Patriots Militia. For those just tuning in, I'm not levying any threats to our president, of course. Those are the words linked to this Everest Wilhelmsen, ostensibly relating the Christian, or representing the Christian American Patriots Militia. Well, I looked at that, and I started to follow the trail, and I'm not exactly certain of the validity of this particular posting. I'm very concerned about this. I'm concerned about the authenticity. I'm concerned about the authenticity of this Wilhelmsen, as well as the authenticity of this group and how this group came to be. The reason I brought this up at this point in time in my presentation is this. If you look at, well, think back, if you're old enough to think back to the time when JFK landed in Dallas or Love Field, and of course you saw the crowds greet him and everyone just so happy to see him. Well, in the background, and leading up to that Dallas appointment there, you'll see signs wanted for treason or just treason in very similar language that was used on the signs by protesters just out of view of those friendly crowds. And that's why, by the way, the Secret Service back in 1963 was extremely concerned with him getting out, JFK getting out and shaking hands, pressing flush with the crowd. Well, what does that have to do with today? The very same atmosphere exists today, except it's 100 times worse, perhaps even 1,000 times worse, because now it's personal with a lot of people. What Obama has done as a dutiful puppet, I believe, a puppet of those rulers who are pulling his strings, are actually causing this chaos, attacking our constitutional rights, attacking our Second Amendment rights, attacking, nationalizing, and actually communizing, if you will, the 1/6 of our economy through this Obamacare and other things. But look at what's going on today. Can you find anyone in the United States, except the zombies that walk around with with their heads on an iPad or with earbuds, who only know what's on television? Can you find anyone without a very strong opinion, positive or negative, about Barack Hussein Obama or whatever his name is, legal name is? No. Combine the atmosphere today with this posting attributed to a Christian American Patriots militia. And once again, I urge you to listen to, or to understand that this is ostensibly a posting that connects Christianity or the Christian faith, that covers our religion. American, it bodes to patriotism. Patriots, of course, same thing. And militia. And what do you think when you think of militia? Most people will think automatically of the Second Amendment. Folks, I believe that Obama is, in fact, in danger. Not only just Obama, but Biden as well. The entire administration is in danger. Now, you might say, well, that's probably a good thing. If that's how you feel, then I suggest you perhaps you look at history and you understand, too, that something would happen to our president, putative president, I will stipulate, and Joe Biden, then especially if it was something violent, and especially if it was something linked to either a Christian militia network or Christian American Patriots militia, or anybody having any associations with Christianity or any proponent of the Second Amendment rights to bear arms, and then, of course, things would radically change. What a way to usher in martial law. What a way to usher in gun confiscation. What a way to solidify the agenda of that man sitting in the Oval Office, is to canonize him in the press. Think about that for a moment. So are we being set up? More importantly, is he being set up? Is he being fattened up like a Thanksgiving turkey for the ultimate slaughter? Even more importantly, knowing the Luciferian and satanic roots of the people in charge, the Committee of 300, the Illuminati, the Luciferians, whatever you call them, and their connection, their belief in that ancient Roman pagan system of belief. Could Barack Hussein Obama, Barry Soetoro, could he be the king of chaos? Boy, that certainly fits. Could he be that who was picked, selected to rule and this is part of the Festival of Saturnalia, to rule for a period of 9 days, and then only to be sacrificed. Is this what we might be seeing take place today? You've got to open your mind up a little bit. If you think, oh, this is just really a bunch of hooey, well, is it really? I mean, do the research, and I would urge everyone to do the research. And let me point out one thing. I will say one resource which is extremely, I believe, extremely important is A View from Space. Gary Bell, of course, that's AM 640 Toronto every Saturday. He had done a very interesting program. If you can find the archives for A View from Space on the internet, I suggest you do so. But he had done a very important broadcast about 9/11 and the birth of Jesus that was phenomenal, dated December 22nd of 2012. So if you're fortunate enough, and I don't know where you might be able to find it, but if you're fortunate enough to find the archive on that, take a listen to that. And he'll lay it all out. And he also talks about Saturnalia as well, the Festival of Saturnalia. But I'm saying right now, I'm wondering if, in fact, that Obama might not be that very sacrifice that we could be looking for. And if that's the case, we're in real danger. We, as a people, are in real danger. And when I saw this November 19th Facebook posting that had all of the language, all of the elements that would pose a threat to our leadership structure, connected by name as Christianity or Christian and American Patriot Militia, all of these keywords, these phrases, even if just by posting this, is there not the possibility of someone acting on it and saying, okay, well, I guess this is my order? And, we have a lot of mind control subjects out there. We've got to understand that. But this Facebook posting, to me, represents a very serious threat to our leadership, especially when everyone in this country has a very strong opinion of Obama, and our leaders abroad, or the leaders of countries abroad, have very strong opinions of him as well, especially, as I mentioned, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Israel, Syria, Turkey, Iran, Russia, China. Are we seeing something domestically coalesce as well as on the world stage with respect to Obama? I believe we are. But it's more than just Obama. It's our country that's at stake, our freedoms. Because, you see, in order for the New World Order, in order for the one world governance that involves political, military, economic, and religious beliefs all to be combined into one belief system, then the United States has to be taken out. Now, folks, you can spend all day long, every day, and I wouldn't fault you if you did, and I certainly don't have any strong feelings either way. You can listen to political talk radio every single day of the year, whether it's constitutional scholars like Mark Levin or political pundits like Rush Limbaugh or Sean Hannity, or even on the progressive left. And this is why we play clips, for example, from Chris Matthews and Ed Schultz, is to give you an understanding of what is out there, the tempo that's out there, the cadence of the belief, the heartbeat of America. We try to portray that in addition to what they're saying and how they're saying it. But we're seeing references to the coming Civil War, but in reality, it's not the coming Civil War, it's the coming revolt. And is this not part of this? Is this one Facebook posting that you may or may not have seen? Perhaps you never heard of this before. But I guarantee you, if something does happen to our leadership, I guarantee you this or postings like this will be all over the news. And regardless of what happens, of course, if it's something that would happen in terms of a small, or not a small, but a lone gunman or a small group of people, you can bet that the gun rights advocates and the Christians, those who are very pro-life, who are anti-abortion, will be in the crosshairs of the hammer that does come down in America. And folks, if you're listening to this, and Karen, God bless you in Rome, and others in Rome who are listening to this, I know that we've got a lot of people listening to us in Rome and other places like the Philippines and in other countries, wherever you're listening to this. If you think that this is just a United States problem, or if something does happen, or if the United States is taken out or rendered impotent on the world stage, and you're not going to be affected, please think again, because you will be affected in a tremendous way. So, just to recap so far, we've got as the global shadow government, the people who are really pushing forward this system of global governance. They adhere to a belief system that is closely linked to this pagan belief system. They adhere to this pagan belief system. And part of that belief system is, of course, things like Saturnalia, the festival of Saturnalia, and the different sun gods. And this is why I talk often about, and I say this often, well, it's not necessarily what we believe, it's what they believe to be that's important. Well, of course, because if you look at how they think, and if you understand how they think, then you'll understand their motivations are, because belief is the driver of action, at least in their camp. Anyway, so is it possible that Obama has, in the eyes of his puppet masters, in the eyes of the people who have ruled him, groomed him to be, and I will say for decades, groomed him to be in the position that he's in, put him there, fully controlled, well beyond anything written, well beyond anything you'll find in any book, regardless of the author. And this is not to diss the authors. This is not to contradict the information that they have supplied, but to supplement what they have supplied. Is it possible that we've seen Obama, that we've looked at him a little bit from the wrong perspective? That Obama himself is controlled, that Obama himself is a tightly controlled puppet. I mean, all of the presidents have been, obviously, for a number of administrations. But look at this one in particular. The lack of bona fides, the lack of proof of eligibility. We all look at that and say, well, some will say it's a distraction. Others will say, wait a minute, why is no one talking? Why are there no judges hearing this? Why is this such a big deal? The birth certificate issue, it's really bigger than that, but why is this a big deal? It's such a big deal that no one wants to touch it. It's like the third rail. Why is there such this push not to touch that subject? Why are people being threatened over this? Why are people losing jobs over this, or have lost jobs? Is it because perhaps that Obama is in fact a wholly owned entity, asset, a completely controlled individual by the global elite, by the royalty, by the true power brokers? And he was groomed from a young age. In fact, his parents and grandparents were groomed, and by extension he was too. And he found himself in this position. And perhaps he himself doesn't realize the enormity. Perhaps he himself doesn't realize who he really is. Maybe he has questions. In fact, the lie perhaps is so enormous he does not even realize the extent to which he is being controlled. It almost makes you feel sorry for the guy. But regardless, you've got to pray for his safety, and you've got to pray for his salvation. And I realize how hard that is, but you've got to pray for his safety and salvation. But if that's the case, and we have this royalty, this elite, this belief structure that are believing that they can control the world and they could take out the United States, and they have put Barack Hussein Obama, Barry Soetoro, in this position, groomed him, and now finally put him in this position to preside over the ultimate destruction of the United States, to take the United States out of the game. And is that not what we're seeing? To take us out of the game. Who better to do it than this undocumented man without pedigree, without any papers? And isn't that what it comes down to? And the years at Columbia and his travels, and also this mystique about his religious beliefs. He'll say he's a Christian, yet the Islamic component is so critically present in his administration, or in his circle of, in his regime, more appropriately. So what we're seeing right now? I ask that you take a few steps back and look at the larger picture of this. Combine what you might have read in the various books about Obama. Combine what you read from Aaron Klein, from Dr. Jerome Corsi, and others. Combine what you have read on different blogs and different websites. Sure, entertain all those thoughts, all that research, all that information, and look at the man through the lens, in the context of this Luciferian, Illuminist context, this Luciferian Illuminati belief system. Does that make a little bit more sense? If you just adjust your view, adjust the television set. Remember those old TVs where you had the dial? I'm sure Joe wouldn't, but remember you had, on the UHF frequency, you adjust it, and the picture would kind of, you'd go from fuzz, and you'd kind of adjust the picture. Where'd those TV sets go? We don't have those dials anymore. Anyway, adjust your view a little bit differently, and think about it that way. Think about it from the perspective of the satanic, or the occult, more appropriately, the occult. Again, you've got to understand the definition of the word occult, but think about that. Now, what we're seeing in the Middle East with respect to Iran, China, Russia, all of these events taking place, now can you see this hidden hand, this hand within the glove? We see the glove, but we don't see the hand. The glove is, of course, what we're allowed to see. The hand, of course, is the belief system that is guiding what's taking place. And this is pretty deep and pretty heavy. I've got to tell you, it really is. But could this perhaps be what we're seeing right now? Oh, but please understand, this just did not happen with Obama. Where we're at right now, it didn't happen just with Obama. It didn't start with Obama. It started many, many, many years ago. And we're going to take kind of a quick walkthrough of some significant events. By the way, remember Ron Brown, the Commerce Secretary? And we're going to talk about that briefly. We're also going to talk about Walmart. See, when you folks perhaps tomorrow wake up in the United States and decide, well, I'm going to do some shopping, and you go to Walmart, perhaps tomorrow you might, when you walk in the door of Walmart, you might look at your shopping experience just a little bit differently. And if you think, well, what are you talking about? How does this even relate to what you're talking about right now? I'll connect the dots for you. I promise. But if you look at the United States, if you would consider us, we'll say, the Titanic. You know, is it planned that if we are going to crash and sink like the Titanic, Is it by design that there are not enough lifeboats? Is it by design that we're going to go down in 2 hours and 30 minutes quicker than expected? Or that 2 hours and 30 minutes it might be a long time to some, a short time to others. It's all relative, I suppose. You know, I just want to wish everyone too. Again, if you're joining me late, I just want to wish you a very happy Thanksgiving, and I just want to tell you that it's very, very kind of you to invite me into your home tonight, or invite me into your car where you might be listening to this program. I just want to say happy Thanksgiving. We are talking about some pretty heavy duty things, but as I said earlier in the program, we have a lot to be thankful for. We have this year, Thanksgiving, as we celebrate with family, perhaps alone, or maybe not at all. Just reflecting on the Thanksgiving part of it. I wonder, and I wondered today, when I entertained helped my wife, I should say, entertain a couple of family members that did stop over, I quietly wondered whether this might be the last normal Thanksgiving we might have. When I say normal, I'm talking about, the food and the trimmings. And if that's the case, you find yourself wondering, well, what do we have to be really thankful for? Of course, we should be thankful for everything that we have right now. We should be thankful for the time that we have together with our family, because and there will come a day, and I don't know if it's within the next 12 months, I don't know when it is, but there will come a day when we're not going to have another Thanksgiving, or we're not going to have the traditional Thanksgiving, because events will not allow us to. That's the design. That's the plan that's in place for the United States. What is in place is for us to be taking out. And it saddens me a little bit, and perhaps, I don't know how you feel, folks, but when you hear the valuable radio time, the valuable television time, the valuable communication time by people that garner millions of people, with audiences of millions, and they spend their time talking about pure politics, partisan politics, instead of getting to the real issues here, trying to search for what's really behind the curtain, and tell you, educate you, inform you, help, take your hand. Let's join hands together and try to find the truth. But it's not being done. And it saddens me that it's not being done, that it's all surface. It's all just talking about the surface scratches, while not really seeing the huge dent that's right behind it or right next to it. And that's why I hopefully tonight that we can really pound into the topics, the subject matter, and really understand, have a good understanding. By the time this program is over, we'll have a great understanding of why things are happening the way they're happening, and by the way, happening according to and right on schedule, I believe, with what is in the King James Bible, or what is in our Holy Bible. I believe it's all there. I believe that if you want answers, it's all there. Think about what we're seeing today from the perspective of being an audience member of a magic act. For an illusion to be effective, for it to work by a magician, the conditions have to be exact. Being a magician, there's a lot of exactness to precision to it. And if a magician looks out over the audience and sees, for example, that conditions, at least in the audience, us as spectators, is just not exactly 100% right, what does he do? Well, he'll buy some time. He'll stall a little bit and work the audience while his assistant or someone else, perhaps off stage, works to get the things just right, works to divert the attention of the audience. That's what's taking place right now. We are going to be seeing some things that we're not going to be able to trust with our own eyes. I mean, how can you trust your own perceptions when you're looking at a magic act? Of course, when you see the woman in the box being sawed in half, she's not really being sawed in half. But yet your eyes, they're showing you that she's cut in half. That's what's ahead of us, ladies and gentlemen. We are going to be looking at this great illusion, which will be a great delusion or deception. And we're going to be looking at a woman cut in half. And then we're going to have these political pundits scurrying to explain what we're seeing. Yet they're not understanding it. Or if they do, they are part of it, part of the illusion. But it's a grand deception. We can't trust what we're seeing. We cannot trust, or we have to understand that what we're seeing is, in fact, an illusion. But how many people that you know are going to really believe that they're witnessing someone being sawed in half? Believe me when I tell you the deception will be so great. Of course, there will be a great multitude, if not a majority, believe their eyes and therefore believe in the deception and call you crazy. What we're about to enter is really a Twilight Zone episode in and of itself. And right now, the magician is working the audience. The audience is us. The magician, well, magicians are the people in power, the real power brokers. They're working us for that precise moment when they can create the illusion and, in fact, deceive us all. Folks, you're listening to a very special Thanksgiving edition of the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. Doug Hagmann flying solo tonight. Joe off with family. I'm holding fast at the helm. I'll be right back after these brief messages. I just, again, want to thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for your belief and your trust in us. And I do hope, I really hope that that we have proven to be an asset to each one of you, an informational asset over the year. Looking at our numbers over the year, folks, I think 64 million downloads, over 70 countries. It's amazing. Couldn't do it without you. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to a very special Thanksgiving Day edition of the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. Doug Hagmann flying solo tonight. I want to thank you, the listeners, for joining me, keeping me company as well tonight on this cold, depending on where you're at, very cold, very blustery winter night. Warm your hands by the hearth because it's cold in the northeast. Got to tell you. Folks, the first hour I talked about some I believe some pretty important information from the pedigree, the origins, the actual placement of Barack Hussein Obama into the position where he's at today. And perhaps it was a little difficult, if you felt me struggling with this, I am. Because, 5 years ago, 4 years ago, hey, maybe even 5 months ago, I don't know, or a year ago, I should say, perhaps, it was difficult for me to even entertain these kind of thoughts. This grand illusion that we're about to see and we're about to be victimized by, not just here in the United States, but if you're in Canada, if you're in Central America, and I know we've got listeners all over the globe, wherever you sit, wherever you stand, you too will be victimized by what is about to take place. And I don't know when it's going to take place, but I do know it's soon. But for me to talk about this in this fashion or entertain these thoughts, oh, come on. I spent 30 years as an investigator working with hard evidence and not fantasy. And to hear this, it's almost like, well, this is all fantasy. Well, no, it's not all fantasy. Not when you start digging and going deep into the rabbit holes. And the rabbit holes are indeed deep. So what are we looking at today? Where is the deception going to take place? How is it going to play out? Well, if you look at just what we're seeing today, you're looking at this new geopolitical realignment process. Folks, this is so important. What we're seeing take place right now is so critical. This is what, in part, Benghazi was all about. This is why we're not getting answers on Benghazi, or the answers on Benghazi are being distorted. And we've got to be very careful, ladies and gentlemen. We've got to be extremely careful who, even in the new media, who we listen to about this. Because there's a lot of information, little nuggets of supposedly insider information being thrown out there that is distorting the real picture, the bigger picture, and even the smaller one about Benghazi, because Benghazi is not just about the 4 people who were murdered, including an ambassador, but it's about millions of potential deaths. And I believe strongly that we in the new media, in this alternative media, but the new media, I believe that we are responsible for thwarting the plans of the power brokers. I truly believe that with all of my heart. And it's because of you listening to my voice, telling someone else, and them telling someone else. The word getting out that, hey, the jig's up. We know what you're doing. We know you're running guns. And we know that you are attempting to build and change the power structure in the Middle East by overthrowing a dictator, the dictator of Syria. Look, he's not a good guy, okay? But the fact of the matter is, we don't have much business over there overthrowing anyone and changing the power structure. So when it comes right down to it, we're looking at China, or I'm sorry, we're looking at this deal with Iran, they're now saying, well, wait a minute, no. What the White House had published, it's all untrue. There's no basis in fact. In fact, they're objecting to what the White House published in very sharp terms. So what's this all about? Is this really about the Iranian nuclear program? No, it's not. Not totally. No, this is about something much bigger. This is a game. This is a cloak and dagger. I shouldn't even say a game. This is a cloak and dagger, really high James Bond stuff, chess at 3 levels, as I've said before, and is echoing the very words of the individual, my intelligence insider. But the U.S. is being made in this whole scheme. If you look at what is taking place, the U.S. is being made to be the odd man out. We are being made to be the pariah of the world. But so is Israel. If you look at biblical text, and if you look at the Bible, as the Holy Bible as it reads, Israel, and specifically Jerusalem, but Israel will be a stumbling block. And by extension, so will the United States. But you see, this is about the money, the resources, and the future. All of the assets, all of the chess pieces. If you look at each country as a specific chess piece, all of the chess pieces are being moved for the final battle. And if you look back in history, Gulf War I, Gulf War II, and then, of course, after 9/11, the Iraqi or Afghanistan, the attack into Afghanistan, and of course Iraq. And you sit back and you think, well, wait a minute. We were told about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, and of course we attacked Iraq, and we know that was a lie, of course. But how many people explain the lie, or what's behind the lie? What is so critical of invading Iraq? And some people will say, well, it's because George Bush wanted to pay back Saddam because of he tried to kill his father. Well, no. It's bigger than that. Think bigger, ladies and gentlemen. Here, in my attempt to convey to you what is taking place in the Middle East and how the United States is going to ultimately be the odd man out, how, in fact, we are going to be portrayed. Keep this analogy in mind. This is not my analogy. This is the analogy used by my good friend last night, who you heard last night, the insider intelligence source that I have, the high-value individual who understands how things are being done. Think about this analogy. Put yourself in the position as a police officer responding to a domestic dispute. We can all relate to this in some way, shape, or form. The husband and wife are really going at it, and well, I could tell you stories, by the way, when I was. I don't want to get too far. I'll just mention this one incident because I think it's somewhat, I don't know, humorous. Back in 1978, 79, when I working as a first responder on a rescue unit, we received a call on Thanksgiving night. In fact, it was Thanksgiving night, 1979, and I would take because back then I didn't have any family commitments. I would take all of the holidays, and I worked at Thanksgiving night, 1979, and I remember getting a call about 6 o'clock in the evening, or we got a call about 6 o'clock in the evening to respond to a stabbing, and we went out, responded to this one residence, and in fact, we were the first there even before the police, and walked into the house, and there was the husband and wife, and there was this beautiful turkey on the table, on the dining room table in this house, and the man was sitting in a chair with a gaping wound, well, actually two, more than two. There's maybe 3 wounds, stab wounds in his abdomen, and he was conscious and alert, and he was sitting on one side of the turkey, and his wife was sitting on the other side of the turkey. And there was the knife that was being used to carve the turkey in his abdomen, still there. And I looked at him and I said, "What happened?" He said, I wasn't very good at carving the turkey. And of course, then he lost consciousness. But of course, we all know what happened. The wife stabbed him with the knife. They were arguing over something, and it turned into a stabbing. By the way, he did turn out just fine. He made it without too many problems. But I mentioned that because the individual who I get counsel from on world affairs had said, think of this as a domestic dispute. If you want to be the odd man out, or the subject to ridicule, persecution, or to bear the brunt of the forces of 2 people or 2 countries, we'll say, that are at odds with one another, just go ahead and go in there and start meddling and start meddling in their affairs. And pretty soon, what you have, instead of a husband and wife arguing with each other, they will turn on the police officer quickly. We've seen this. If you haven't seen it personally as a first responder, you've seen it, I'm sure, on television, or you've seen it in real life, where you intervene in a domestic dispute, and pretty soon the 2 people who are arguing turn on you, the third party. Well, this is, in a macro sense, this is exactly what we are going to be seeing in the Middle East, and globally for that matter. Because right now what we're seeing is this ostensible agreement where the U.S. has brokered a deal with Iran. Who's the victim here? Saudi Arabia is the victim. Well, I use that word kind of loosely, but nonetheless, Saudi Arabia says, wait a minute, is saying, wait a minute, you're supposed to be our friends. We're selling you oil. We're selling you oil at a dramatically reduced cost, and of course, that money that we're paying them eventually comes back to us, and we in turn act as the police agent of the world. But so Saudi Arabia is very, very unhappy that we're by their view somewhat taking sides with Iran. They're saying, hey, this is not right. Well, how does this make sense? Because didn't we say before that Iran is in fact a proxy of Russia, and aren't we at odds with Russia? How does this make sense? I don't understand this. Well, once again, this is chess at three levels. You've got to understand that these alliances that are forming, they're forming in a manner that is best for the particular country at that given time, and everything is being managed behind the scenes for a larger purpose. I suppose that's the key. While we are dealing with Iran, Saudi Arabia is looking at this as a kick in their behind. And, of course, Saudi Arabia is saying, well, we can't any longer rely on the United States for military protection, as they have given us, our oil fields and what have you, in exchange for cheap oil. So who do we look for? Who do we look to create an alliance? Well, geographically and even culturally, it's going to be China. Remember, I mentioned about Walmart. Keep that in the back of your head for a few more minutes here. Yeah, thank you, JL. Walmart and China, two of the same. We are going to see the Saudis suddenly say, you know what? Oh, yeah, and by the way, the oil that is sold by Saudi Arabia, this is being done in U.S. dollars. What happens when the petrodollar is threatened? Because the soft underbelly of the United States is, of course, the petrodollar. If, and I say if, but when the plug is to be pulled on the petrodollar, and they're setting this up right now, but it's on their schedule, not what we think, not when we think it'll happen. It's on their schedule. They have a very specific schedule in mind. What it is, I cannot tell you. I know that, well, based on information I've received, there is a certain drop-dead date by that these events, all of these events, have to be accomplished. I don't know. I believe it's 2016 or thereabouts. But at some point in time, they will pull the plug on the dollar, at which point the United States becomes impotent to be the policeman of the world. And Saudi Arabia will, in fact, belly up with China, side up with China, and along with that, take Egypt with them, as you heard last night. Also involved in that whole conglomerate of strange political bedfellows and strange strategic bedfellows is Israel, who will go along with that alliance, because in opposition to Israel, of course, is Russia and Iran and Syria and Turkey. And I had written back in 2008 where the United States would not only fail to support Israel, but we would intentionally be at odds with Israel. And it's recorded on my website, HomelandSecurityUS.com, that very prediction. based on information I received from another source within the government saying that this is where they're working, this is what they're working toward. But this is all being controlled out of the city of London through the banking system. This currency manipulation. When you look at this petrodollar and the scheduled attack on the petrodollar to take out the United States of America, this is the grand scheme. This is the grand plan. The fact that China has been amassing large amounts of gold reserves over the last 2 years, 18 months, 2 years, or even longer, the public publicity that has been given to that, you'll often read that in websites like Silver Doctors or what's the other one? Oh goodness, a very well-known website. I'm looking right here because I think it's important to understand when you look at these websites, and they are in fact places to go for information about monetary issues. It escapes me right now. Too much turkey, apparently. But Zero Hedge, thank you very much. Thank you so much. Zero Hedge. When you look at these reports of the gold being amassed by China, and you look at these reports of even the euro, even the European countries, they've got some gold, collected some gold. There's going to a gold-backed currency. Well, the United States is an oil-backed currency at the very best. So what is going to be taking place is the purchasing or the trading of oil via Saudi Arabia in gold-backed currencies such as the Chinese currency. Now, China, people will say China's got huge economical problems, huge problems. What's the best way, folks, for China to cure their economic problems? Remember, they're heavily loaded with U.S. debt, with U.S. paper. Is it to come in and take us over? Well, ultimately, perhaps, but in the short term, cheap oil, cheap energy. You see, the world runs on energy, so if they can get cheap energy, doesn't that make sense that they would do just that? Go and line up with the people, with the countries that can offer them cheap energy? That's where Saudi Arabia comes in. Also, if you look at the strategic reserves, the strategic resources of different countries, don't forget Russia is one of the largest, if not the largest, producer of oil in the world. So there are supplies, exchanges of supplies between Russia and Iran, Turkey, and of course Syria. So there's a whole laundry list of different issues, aspects of this that come into play. Primarily the resources, primarily the energy. When we are unable to protect the oil fields because the power brokers have taken away our ability to purchase cheap oil and to have the dollar trade in, or have oil traded in U.S. dollars, well, then the United States will fall rapidly down that precipice, over that precipice. So anyway, that's what's on tap. That's the future. That's what's going to be happening in America. Or to America, perhaps, is the better way of saying it. But like I said, look at the United States as a third party, and this is the best analogy I've heard. Look at the United States as a third party in a domestic dispute. Because at some point in time, and we see this in the writings, in fact, Dave Hodges from the Common Sense Show and others, you'll find these writings where China and even Russia, Chinese troops here in the United States, Russian troops in the United States. Well, what's going on with all that? Well, they each have their own separate interests, but at the very top is the same the royalty, the same power brokers that are actually maneuvering this. And even though there will be a point in time when Russia and China will be at odds, what will draw them on the same side and draw everyone on the same side is much like the domestic dispute. China and Russia will ultimately hook together and come at the United States. But that's down the road. And if that doesn't sound logical to you, or if all of this sounds very difficult to comprehend or believe or understand, understand this. Logic does not exist in hell, and we're about to enter hell, at least metaphorically. But through our actions, we are pushing Saudi Arabia into China's arms. The political elite, the royal people, the people that are behind all of this worldwide you can see that they're gearing up. They're gearing up to keep themselves safe, to get themselves out of the way of what's coming. Which brings me to, Walmart, and also the reference from Dave Hodges on the Common Sense Show. The elite have been preparing. Let me take you back to September of 2011, the evacuation of the elite to their safe hideaway, to the safe hideaways. This was an operation it was a DHS exercise known as Operation Mountain Guardian. This was also referenced in a December 9th, 2012 interview on the Common Sense Show with Jim Marrs, where Jim Marrs, regardless of what you may or may not think of him, and folks, don't shoot the messengers at this point, just get the information. But Jim Marrs is discussing how approximately 400 to 500 top-level bankers have left their positions and have gone into seclusion. Now, during that program, Jim told Dave and his listeners how this elite of the elite here, at least in the United States, have developed seed vaults, across the world too, which only they have access to. And he was alluding to, according to Dave Hodges, excuse me, the fact that they had some very bad events. Some very bad events are coming, and the global elite are aware of it, and they want to protect themselves. Kind of like, hey, I've got mine, too bad for you, and I'm going to protect me and mine, and you're on your own. And haven't we seen this in a much smaller scale, for example, with hurricanes? If you think that the federal government is actually helping you to prepare, they're not. No, they're not. They're preparing themselves or helping themselves, and not us. They're managing us. They're not preparing us. They're managing us. They are not helping us, and they're taking care of themselves. But once again, in September of 2011, this evacuation of this elite, of these the richest of the rich and the most powerful, even well be above the government, the people in government here, at least in the United States, they practiced this exercise known as Operation Mountain Guardian, in which the Denver airport was shut down to commercial air travel except for very specific undesignated planes, which were allowed to land in preparation for some staged catastrophe. Do you remember hearing about this? I don't. The event is not newsworthy because it had been reported in the mainstream. However, where this event becomes noteworthy to the public is because it is not coincidental that the CIA, they've relocated all of their data collection facilities to underground structures at the Denver International Airport. And think about what's at the Denver International Airport. Think about the murals. Think about the messages that are being conveyed, because, of course, Denver will be the new capital of the United States. And I did not believe that. for 1 minute, I thought, boy, is that just talk about fancy and conspiracy theories. But as you look at the construction and look at all of the evidence, I say evidence because it's there. Obviously, they're planning or expecting something. If they're not planning it, they're certainly expecting it and aware of it. And they will retreat to their safe houses, their underground bunkers. But what about us? Well, how did this all take place? For example, how did we get here? In other words, how did all these underground bunkers happen and these elite? And what's going on in a larger sense? Well, let's just take a really quick look at history. Before I do, I'm going to take a quick break. I'm going to be right back after this while I hydrate, clear my scratchy throat, and we'll come back and we'll get into this very important information, and then ultimately wrap it up at in the third hour to tell you how and what I see and what I believe we should be looking for and aware when this all comes together. Let's stay with us. We'll be right back after this brief. Thanks for hanging with me on this Thanksgiving Day. This very special broadcast. You know, we do have a lot to be thankful for, and for every Thanksgiving that we can celebrate together, for every celebration at Christmas, the gatherings, the hospitality, the family. We should be on our knees thanking God that we've got that ability to do so, and we should take advantage of it while we still can. The importance, I had mentioned Walmart before, and if to understand what's really going on and to understand in context, for example, the Denver airport, to understand when people, whether it's Steve Quayle or whoever, L.A. Marzulli, I'm just trying to think of all of the various people when they say, well, you know, there are underground bases, underground bunkers, and there are these, when people talk about shadow banking, it's almost as if many people, and I'm not accusing anyone of doing this, I'm just saying it's almost as if that the people who talk think or believe that me even, I'm up to speed on things, how we got here or what the components are to this mess. And very quickly, they talk so quickly, and even I catch myself doing it, believing that everyone's on the same page when in fact we're not. And sometimes when we talk to our relatives, no wonder they look at us like we've got two heads and 16 eyes. Because what are we saying? Well, we believe that they're up to speed on things, and we believe that they understand how the events of today, how Israel and Iran and what's going on in the Middle East and Benghazi, how this all fits into the grander scheme of things, and how this all fits into, well, things that are taking place with the construction of these underground bunkers for the protection of the royal elite, the royal family here of America and whatever country you might be listening to me in. Well, let's take a real quick look at the larger aspect, the bigger picture here. Let's look at Walmart for a second, okay? Because Walmart figures prominently into a number of things in ways which you perhaps might be surprised to learn. We talk about the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers, for example. We talk about the grand, big plan of things. Well, let's take a look at Walmart for a second. Just to understand Walmart, and I'm going to digress a bit here. You've got to have a handle, for example, on Arkansas. And to understand Arkansas, you've got to know about the Rockefellers. And you also have to understand the relationship between the Illuminati, the global elite, the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds. You've got to understand their relationship to China. Remember I talked about China, Saudi Arabia running into the arms of China? And to fathom China and what's going on there in these Chinese troops, the Chinese secret police, you've got to know about the Rockefellers because they're the key in many areas. The Rockefellers like to own and operate entire states, entire countries even, but states here in the United States with a very big landmass, with good natural assets and a reasonably small population relative to the landmass. That way, if need be, to win any type of an election, they could more or less find it somewhat cheap to buy all the votes that might be needed to install their own people. Now, West Virginia, in addition to Arkansas, West Virginia is a state. If you look at the Rockefellers, what they like to do in all these Illuminatis, they like to have interest in both sides of a fight. They like to have a foot on both sides of the divide. They like to finance and support both sides in a war. They like to hedge their bets by funding all sides of a conflict, and that's what's taking place here in the world today. Sometimes they pretend here in America to be Republicans, sometimes Democrats. Of course, you can look at John D. Rockefeller IV, the great-grandson of John D. Rockefeller, the founder of the infamous Standard Oil Trust, which, by the way, was broken up by a U.S. Supreme Court decision back in 1911. But anyway, you look at even John D. Rockefeller as a senator. He called himself J. His wife, Sharon Percy Rockefeller, she has a key position in public broadcasting, actually. If you look at it, National Public Radio. That's where Sharon Percy Rockefeller has her interests, and one might call it even National Petroleum Radio. But that aside, if you follow the money and understand the Rockefellers and understand how they're operating, how they actually own the state of Arkansas, and who do we get from Arkansas but the Clinton regime, William Jefferson Clinton, and of course Hillary Rodham Clinton, the Secretary of State during the worst massacre that is Benghazi in recent memory. Well, if you understand that both William Jefferson Clinton and Hillary Rodham Clinton are covered by the Rockefellers, well, in part because William Jefferson Clinton is reported to be the illegitimate child of Winthrop Rockefeller, and one can find this out themselves by doing searches. If you do searches, you'll find a lot of circumstantial evidence, and I would urge you to do so. Once again, if you understand that the Rockefellers have their incestuous handle in the families here in the United States as well as all across the world, and that people such as William Jefferson Clinton are not who they say they are. William Jefferson Clinton is, in fact, a Rockefeller. Well, things begin to make sense. There's a lot of things that start to make sense. And if you just as, in fact, look at it like we looked at Barack Hussein Obama, there's a book out there saying Barack Hussein Obama is actually the son, the offspring of Frank Marshall Davis. Well, if that is important to people, so too should the relationship of William Jefferson Clinton to Rockefeller be. But this is all circumstantial evidence, and a lot of times people say, well, produce your evidence, prove what you're saying. You know what, folks? If you work murder investigations, if you work investigations, a lot of time circumstantial evidence will have more weight in an investigation than actual evidence. Most desired would be physical evidence, but absent of that, circumstantial evidence has a lot of weight because it's very difficult to manufacture circumstantial evidence. But that said, look at the circumstantial evidence with respect to the family ties. When I mentioned Walmart, it's difficult to talk about Walmart. It's difficult to talk about these other companies, including Tyson Chicken. I'll throw that in there too, in Arkansas, and William Clinton. It's difficult to separate all of those subjects together. If you look at how we got to where we are today, go back into the 1970s even, and I'll just start there very quickly. The Rockefeller banks, like the First National Bank of Chicago, which has been subsequently renamed to Bank One, they started loaning billions of dollars to China. The promise was that China would pay back with gold from their western provinces, but China did not allow any inspectors to determine if they had that much gold. This is back in the 70s now. Instead, China had been allowed to pay back with what was called China White. What was China White? Well, I think you know that China White was the heroin, the drugs coming into the United States. The American CIA were the security force protecting the assets and oil fields of the Rockefellers. So it should come as no surprise that the Chinese, including the Riyadi family, remember that family name from years past, suddenly got big in Arkansas. Remember the Riyadi, the scandal with the Riyadis and the Clintons? The Riyadis, a money laundering vehicle, had been set up in Arkansas. The biggest Rockefeller-linked bond house outside of Wall Street. It was headquartered in Little Rock. It was known as Stephen and Company. Stephen with a PH, Stephen and Company. In the 1980s, the CIA was shipping guns to Central America and returning drugs here into Arkansas via Mena, Arkansas. Some of the drugs were originating in Colombia and a few other places, but a lot of it was actually coming from China, hence China White. But in detail, this whole operation was centered around this small community in western Arkansas known as Mena and the Mena Airport. Remember that the Riyadis bought the small First National Bank of Mena as a vehicle to launder money. This, I allege, based on my research, and others allege this as well. And in fact, you can find connections to the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, the Chicago Board of Trade, and the Chicago Board of Options Exchange. But anyway, it's important for us to understand how profound and how pervasive this Rockefeller/Rothschild, but specifically the Rockefeller and Rothschild, well, both of them, the influence that they have in our government. Very key when I talk about the past is the drug smuggling into the U.S. via Arkansas, especially back in the 1980s. And if you look, how ironic is this, or how mind-blowing is this, to cover up this massive dope drug smuggling ring, it was one Asa Hutchinson. He was named head of the DEA, actually. And what better place or what better position can be used to cover up the drug smuggling than to head up the very agency used to combat it? Well, back to Walmart. Walmart and J.B. Hunt Transport Services, located in Arkansas, a state held, really controlled by the Rockefellers, and a state managed by Governor William Jefferson Clinton, otherwise known as William Rockefeller Clinton, I suppose. He figured very prominently as a key man, a key member of this international cabal, smuggling cabal out of Arkansas. But he figured very prominently with China. If you look back into his administration, or his regime, as I'll call it, you'll find that Clinton himself had done a lot with the Chinese. If you look at everything that he had done with the Chinese during his rule, well, it becomes clear that he is loyal to not the United States of America, but to China, and as a governor, used his state of Arkansas to funnel the weapons and out of of the from the United States to other areas, and to funnel the drugs from China as well as Colombia into Arkansas. But Walmart, if you look at this from a larger perspective, appears to be, at least in my research, a front for the Rockefellers and even for China. Their cheap prices are based on production by, Chinese slave labor in camps and factories that are operated by the Chinese military police, or their secret police, if you will. Items that we find tomorrow, perhaps when we go to take advantage of the Black Friday sales, items that sell in other stores for, $50, you can get them at Walmart for 20 or half that. Why is that? Is it because the items are cheap? Well, that's part of it, but there is also this funding. There is also this kickback with the items produced by or sold by Walmart, slave labor. The explosive growth of Walmart during the 1980s, when the Rockefellers were bringing and installing the Chinese in Arkansas, in American businesses in Arkansas and throughout the country, they were playing the China card. They were cultivating the relationship now that we see developing today. The backdrop for this push, this push for Saudi Arabia to be pushed into the arms of China is a Rockefeller or an Illuminist operation. So what you see taking place right now, for example, you see Saudi Arabia saying, oh man, you know what, the United States has let us down because they're dealing with Iran. Well, what if I told you that's exactly what the Rockefellers want, because they have interest in China. They've got a lot of control in China, and they have brought it forth here into this country through Arkansas. This is not just something that is happened because of, just because of some cosmic accident. There's a lot behind this, and it goes back into the 1980s, and it goes back to the Clintons, and it extends forward through today. When you look at the Chinese, the influence, you look at the decade of the 80s and the explosion of Walmart, how they got so big. How did they get so big? How did Walmart get from just a very, the success story? You've all heard it. Was it through hard work? Was it this great American success story without any outside influence? Boy, I'd like to believe that. As well as their drivers, the J.B. Hunt company located in Arkansas. Was their explosive growth because of Walmart? And was Walmart's growth because of hard work? And perhaps, but perhaps there was more to this. Perhaps Walmart got big. Maybe there was some other issues. Maybe it was their relationship or their dealings with William Rockefeller Clinton, William Jefferson Clinton, when he was governor, that paved the way for this explosion of growth. Don't forget, folks, the airport for Walmart in Arkansas, much like the Denver airport. Well, it was funded in part, or I should say there was money that was received to build this airport in Arkansas, specifically for Walmart, through backdoor government funds, while Clinton was governor. And Walmart, being heavily tied in with the Chinese to sell the Chinese products here in America. Well, you can see where I'm going with this. This is a big convoluted mess in their distribution network by the Hunt Trucking Company. Did you ever think perhaps because of the distribution that they've got, the network that they have, what might be going in and out of, we'll say, the airport in Arkansas that's operated by Walmart. It's a private airport. We talked about the Denver airport, and of course, Jim Mars and Dave Hodges referenced the Denver airport and the traffic there. But what about the Walmart airport? Could this be being used for something more than inventory to the stores, the inventory that we see? Well, it's my contention, based on my research, that what we're seeing here is the 1980s. That during the 1980s, the Rockefellers were actually setting up Arkansas as a Chinese outpost in America, using as their front Walmart. What better way to disguise, to hide, as a smokescreen, to hide this China connection than an American iconic business? Now, before you say that I've taken leave of my senses and I've actually had too much wine today with my Thanksgiving dinner, do the research. Just in any search engine, type in China plus Walmart. And look at the history, or China, Walmart, and Clinton, or China, Walmart, and Rockefeller. But go to find sites that have reliable information that you can actually verify. You'll see what I mean. In the northwest corner, by the way, of Arkansas, near Rogers, Arkansas, there's this huge new Northwest Airport, Arkansas Regional Airport, and this is what I'm talking about. When he was president, Clinton had dedicated this new facility back in 1998. Its runways can handle the largest current airplanes, by the way. The jumbo jets planned, even that weren't constructed back then. It also has a free trade zone. That means incoming air freight and coming nonstop from overseas. This air freight is not necessarily subject to inspection by U.S. Customs and is not subject to customs duties and fees. It's like its own autonomous region. It's a place for huge nonstop air flights from China. It's got numerous warehouses. Law enforcement personnel contend that it's not difficult to evade any type of regulations as to the free trade zone. Folks, remember all the talks of free trade zones and the smokescreen that they had that was apparent with free trade zones, or the I should say the free trade zones, how they were being billed to Americans, how it was being sold to Americans. Well, there was more to the free trade zones than just free trade. We're talking about a method, for example, to evade detection. And I contend, based on my investigation here and others who concur, that there was much more going on than just free trade. It's in northwest Arkansas, in Rogers, Arkansas, near Rogers, Arkansas. Again, this airport for Walmart. It's this huge. It's a place for huge nonstop air flights from China, and also numerous warehouses. Incoming nonstop air shipments from China. Reportedly, some, perhaps containing contraband, can be quietly transferred to another warehouse and reshipped to destinations here inside the United States. And because of, as I said, the free trade zone, the U.S. DEA, the personnel, and other federal authorities claim not to have any jurisdiction to inspect what's coming in from China. Now, looking at the big picture, doesn't the setup for what we're seeing today, doesn't this add a little bit more information when you hear about, Chinese troops here in this country? Wait a minute. What's going on? Can you verify And how does that even make sense? Well, when you look at the backstory here, and you start to look at what's really going on in the relationship between the Rockefellers and the China, then things like Chinese influence and involvement here in the United States, the threat of China to the U.S. become a little bit clearer, at least in my view. I think perhaps you might feel the same way. Would it not be? No, I don't believe it would be that hard to really make the connection that you've got these transportation hubs all over the country being used for a number of different purposes. More on that on the other side. You're listening to the Hagmann and Hagmann Report, the Thanksgiving episode. Glad you're joining us. Thank you for keeping me company tonight. We'll be right back. About 2.5 minutes. Stay with us. And Mike G. for checking in, and thank you, Margot, for checking in. Glenn, God bless you. Ken, Carl, and Angelin L., thank you for checking in, and happy Thanksgiving to you all. Gary, God bless you, my friend. Again, please pray for our brother, our family, part of our family, Larry. I believe it's known as Infidel in the chat room, hospitalized. And he is in critical condition tonight with a heart issue. And it's very serious, and we need to pray for him and his wife. We need to keep him in our prayers and our thoughts, and pray that he makes it through this physical challenge that he's got. And it's just incredible. We just never know. And we all talk about, well, the end is near. Kind of allude to, well, the end is near. Well, perhaps the end for us, me, you, who knows, is closer to us than we might really imagine. We might go to bed tonight and not wake up. And that's what we should keep in our minds, that, we've got to be right, spiritually correct, because we don't know what could happen. But please keep Larry in your prayers. Also, as an announcement, American Survival Wholesale is extending their White Wednesday sale. Please, if you haven't had the opportunity to view the items on sale, deeply discounted items for your preps, certainly that's very well worth your time. I know that I'm actually calling people by phone and saying, look, you've got to check this out. So please do so. But yes, Glenn, you did hear me correct. These free trade zones that are set up and have been set up or were set up in the 1980s under William Jefferson Clinton in the Congress, yes, they circumvent any type of DEA inspection. Ross Perot, remember him? He's made public statements that he is for what's good for America, and of course, advocates these free trade zones. But did you know that his son operates a free trade zone and airport in Texas? It's just something to consider when you're looking at all of the players in the landscape of American politics. But what kind of, as I said, what kind of illicit goods perhaps might be coming to and from this airport, this Walmart airport, if you will? Well, illegal weapons like AK-47, submachine guns, unlawfully headed for inner-city narco-terrorist street gangs. Can you believe that? Is that possible? To cause turmoil and chaos in America by this, fomenting chaos here in America? I often talk about that. I write about this, that it's a plan. It's a plan to foment chaos. What better way to crack down, usher in martial law? We talk about martial law all the time. Well, how is this being done? Is this possible that it's being done in this fashion? Well, let's look a little bit closer. I mean, if you look at where, for example, some of the weaponry is being manufactured, it's by a Chinese military-owned firm headed by Wang Yang. Well, Wang Yang is also was the head of the Chinese secret police, the person we know as William Jefferson Clinton. He met with this man from time to time in the White House. If you look at the White House visitor logs, He turned over a lot of financial, industrial, and military secrets to the Chinese through this Wang Yung. And by the way, the spelling, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this right, is Jun. If you look, there are exclusive and numerous details about, in fact, I believe one source is Sherman Skolnick. I don't know if this is where this had come from, but I believe he wrote about this, where a highly patriotic group of 24 flag officers, U.S. admirals, generals, who, from 1995 forward, had sought under the military code to arrest Clinton for treason at the time he was commander-in-chief, or at least occupying the White House. That didn't get any press, and that was really not talked about, but that's been based on my research, and I believe it was uncovered by this Sherman Skolnick. Now, at any rate, moving forward, since 1995, I should point this out in my research. If you look at the group of 24 flag officers, you'll find that about a dozen or so have been assassinated. No surprise there. You look at the military purge taking place today of all of the top flag corps. Well, is it without precedent? No. There was certainly attempts back in the 90s against Clinton, and are we not seeing perhaps a somewhat of the same template, but in a larger type of purge? Because there was a purge back then, and absolutely, I would say the Clintons have never left power, folks, in Washington. The Clintons are true Rockefeller, true elitists, and they are the power brokers that are assisting in to bring in this one world governance. But let's look. Remember the kerfluffle with Clinton's dalliances. Remember Ken Starr, who was allegedly or ostensibly going after William Jefferson Rockefeller Clinton. Well, he was focused primarily on Bill's sexual dalliances with Monica Lewinsky, and he spent the bulk of his time in private law practice while he was serving as an independent counsel. But get this: do you know what the name of one of his key clients of his law practice was? You guessed it, Wang Yung. Starr, he was also an unregistered foreign lobbyist for the Beijing government. So the Starr-Clinton episodes, yeah, that was just kind of an act in theater. When you understand this, you will understand why the new airport, or the relatively new airport in northwest Arkansas, was in fact christened by William Clinton as, well, it was designated as China's airport on U.S. soil. If you look at the map at the area nearby in Bentonville, well, that's the headquarters of Walmart, Sam's Club, and many other subsidiaries. And, of course, Walmart, we know, depends on receiving goods from China, made by, I'll say it, slave labor, under the authority of the Chinese secret police. And if you look at a map, too, and right near in Springdale, Arkansas, is the headquarters of Tyson Foods. I mentioned them earlier in the program. And, well, it's Tyson Chickens. They dominate the U.S. chicken market. And Tyson, by the way, exports to more than 70 countries. You know, one would say that perhaps, or one might suspect that Tyson might be the benefactors or being financed in part by, well, other things, shall we say. You can read between the lines. They had visited China to share, this is going back some years, but it's important to note they had visited China to share their expertise with the Chinese. In fact, had sent some chickens over to China, for old chickens, for them to practice on. Can you imagine, folks? sending old chickens to China for them to practice their culinary skills, to carve and cut up properly, as if we're teaching the Chinese how to do this. It just doesn't make any sense. But one of the items from China to arrive in the free trade zone of the Arkansas Regional Airport, or I'm sorry, when you look at the items coming into this airport in the free trade zone, you have to look at where they go from there and who takes them. Well, I mentioned J.P. Hunt Transport Services. That's, according to my research and others, that's one of the biggest transportation services operating on behalf of Walmart, or at least it was. And if you look at the infrastructure, Benton County, just about every judge has or had stock in Walmart. And throughout the judiciary in Arkansas, there's financial interest all throughout Walmart, which leads right back to China. And it leads back to, of course, Bill Clinton. And, we can't leave another part of this out. This also extends into Chicago. And where is Obama from? But from Chicago. This whole Rockefeller-Rothschild scheme, this plan, it's insidious. The state of Arkansas, the Rockefeller family, they've had this two-pronged plan for some time. As an agent for the Rockefellers and also for China, Bill Clinton arranged for that regional airport down in Arkansas to be built. Some people thought it was unnecessary. Some didn't take into consideration its location close to the three Rockefeller assisted fortune companies that are headquartered nearby. You're looking at Tyson Foods and Tyson Chickens and their transportation wing, as I said, J.P. Hunt Transport Services. Folks, look this up. The oil-soaked, spy-ridden monopoly press, the media, they don't mention the plans of the Rockefellers. They don't mention the plans of the shadow government. They don't mention anything at all and how this relates to what's going on today. Much like what happened in the UK back in the 19th century, seeking to subjugate China with opium, the Rockefellers, as first part of the plan, they're seeking control of the people here in the United States by flooding our nation with China white, the high-purity dope from Southwest China. And, of course, we know that the people, the users, prefer this China white because it can be smoked and cracked, and it doesn't require a needle in the arm, and it's relatively cheap but good quality. This brings me into the drug war. And if you grab a hold of a copy of Radley Balko's book, Rise of the Warrior Cop, Mr. Balko goes into great detail about the drug war and about how the drug war has been used as the framework for the militarization of our police departments going way back into the 80s. So overlap the information I'm giving you now with the information contained in Radley Balko's book, and then take a couple of steps back and look at how all of this is being created and who has been creating this infrastructure for martial law. People think, and people have a tendency to really simplify things. And I've seen this on multiple forums where people will say, well, martial law won't come, or if it does, look at the government. They're inept, they're incompetent, and it's difficult to get things going so quickly. No, folks. The framework, the infrastructure, whether it's the infrastructure of the bunkers for the elite or the framework of running drugs and money and weapons, which this is all about, or at least the vehicle, the larger vehicle for things to happen. Well, it all begins to make sense because the information overlaps, and we're looking at something that it's not while it might surprise many who aren't paying attention, those who know the background of this information or have this information and know the background will say, oh, yeah, okay, this is how they set this up. And look, it's William Jefferson Clinton, who was a Rockefeller, who was part of it, and his wife Hillary, who married into it. And, of course, the Rockefeller control over Hillary and Bill, and Hillary serving as Obama's Secretary of State, and, of course, Hillary coming up in 2016, if we get that far, as the next president, it all begins to make sense. It didn't happen overnight. It did not happen overnight at all. If you continue this trail of breadcrumbs and you look, I spent a great deal of time talking about Clinton and Walmart and in the airport there and how things are ostensibly or perhaps possibly shaping up. You can also take this to George Herbert Walker Bush when he became president, of course, as a vice president, and his time in the CIA and how the CIA had been involved in gun running and what have you, and the Iran-Contra affair. This is all an extension. What we're seeing today is an extension of what happened in the 70s and even, well, specifically the 80s and then the 90s. It's just an extension of, today is just an extension of all that. Folks, I'm going to take a very quick break. I'm going to come back at the other side of the break. We're going to continue talking about this, but there is a couple of issues here I want to wrap up with. Issues that when I tell you this, when I tell you it'll all become clear, I believe, in all time, it'll all tie everything together here. It's amazing because it does explain, for example, the Gulf War. It does explain Israel, Rahm Emanuel, Chicago, Clinton, Bush, Obama, Chicago, Arkansas, Washington, the financial markets, all of these other consortiums are going to bring it all tied all together. And even the trafficking of human body parts. Yes, I said the trafficking of human body parts and how that relates to satanic rituals. Russ Dizdar had a fantastic conference on that a couple of weeks ago. But did you know that's part of this whole unsavory topic that we're going through? I'm going to tie it all together right after I take a quick break. And going to be with you for the next 30 minutes. I want to say thank you, Mike F., for checking in from Lexington, Kentucky. Glad that you found us. Kim, thank you so much for your kind words. John, I just want to respond because I've been getting a number of emails about this, and John F., thank you for your inquiry. He asked, which song, who's that artist of the bumper music tonight? Well, that's our good friend, Bertane Duckworth. The song is Doubts. Bertane Duckworth is a good friend of the program, and he's given us license to use that song, Doubts, just like it is, Doubts. We all have doubts, and you can find that on YouTube, DOUBTS, Doubts, and if you happen to download that, just give a shout-out to Bertane, tell him you heard it on our program. Also, Glenn, thank you very much. You know, Glenn writes, if in fact there's truth, the airports, Walmart's airports and other airports, and servicing Walmart, the concern of Walmart, he writes, it leads to some heavy concern about not only what, but who may be or might have been flown in or even out. And that's something to think about as well, because that does raise some concerns. Margot, with respect to your question about the Federal Protection Services beefing up their presence in states like New York, Wisconsin, and such, since the New World Order runs our country, which it does, maybe the Rockefellers are beefing up their DHS forces in Arkansas as they might have, like you said, something major to protect in civil unrest. Yes, themselves, but yes, the logistics hub of a larger network. I contend, it's my belief based on my research, that they're protecting this logistics hub. And if you look to, once again, follow the money, the largest, during Clinton's time, the largest off Wall Street brokerage house located in Little Rock, Arkansas, Stevens. Follow the money. Let's tie this all together because there's just so much information, and I've gotten a couple of emails saying, "Man, my head's spinning from all this information." Well, what we're seeing today is the culmination of the plans of the elite, the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds. You're seeing this infrastructure being built in this country right in plain view. What's the best? Seriously, where's the best place to hide a covert activity or an object right in plain view? And this is exactly what we're seeing right now. In fact, this is what we've been seeing over the last quarter of a century. If you look back just a little bit further, and I will make this my final digression. If you look back a little bit further and throw the CIA into this, our CIA has made great use of espionage experts, doctors, and others of significance left over from World War II. If you think about when people talk, when you hear radio programs, when you hear new media talk about the CIA and about the operations that brought the Nazis over and their use of these assets, well, how deep is this? I mean, where? What? Well, look at and we're focusing heavily tonight on China. There's also a Russian component to this, but let's stay with China and not go beyond this for at least for tonight. If you look at China, how they have infiltrated the United States and how they are actually punishing us on our own soil and how they are exacting their pound of flesh and will be in the future, they're doing it using our own assets, whether they're CIA, former OSS assets, or they're using corporate tools, corporate fronts. It doesn't take a lot of, it doesn't take much, shall we say, much imagination to see the Chinese influence here in this country and how we are going to be subjugated to China ultimately, because we have the Chinese financial elite, we have the Rockefellers who are heavily involved in Chinese affairs. And also, by the way, the British monarchy, the royal family, when you look at, for example, the history, the Korean War that ended in 1953 in our peace accord with North Korea, to which there still are no surrender terms. And we see North Korea making mischief today as America is gradually ground down as a world power. Well, mainland China, of course, intervened in the police action that's known as Korea. The Chinese secret police, which is one of the most accomplished covert police spy agencies in the world, they had a score to settle with the United States. They Beijing government was certainly upset in that our military, supposedly acting for the United Nations under MacArthur, had caused China to intervene in the war. Well, how did that happen? See, MacArthur ordered U.S. troops to continue their penetration of North Korea all the way to the Yalu River, to the North Korea-China border. Well, the result was that the waves and waves of Chinese troops in the dead of winter, no less, attacked our troops. And, of course, there were heavy casualties on both sides, and we lost a number of young Americans in the days that followed. MacArthur wanted to retaliate with massive force and use nuclear weapons against China. This, of course, set just a tremendous backlash. And President Truman recalled MacArthur. By the way, MacArthur was greeted in America with ticker tape parades, but some of what happened thereafter was more or less concealed from us, from the average American. And you've got to go back a little bit further in time to understand that China has a long history, going back into the, way back into the early part of the millennium. They've always been highly skilled at their work, and of course, the art of war. You hear people talking about Sun Tzu. Well, this is all part of it. I mean, this is what we're seeing as being used as the playbook even today. Anyway, the China secret police, they have a long history. They've always been highly skilled. They've written books on the warfare. They've written books. They could teach classes at the CIA and FBI. They're skilled in counterintelligence. They deal just a tremendous amount of skill. All of these geopolitical issues and skill sets, spooks, if you will. Just a small number of American spies really have in the past been able to really handle some of the things that China has thrown at us, especially around the time of the Korean War. In fact, the CIA had lobbied to stop, to get away from China, stop messing with China, and because of the cleverness and the way that how adept the Chinese were at things like spying and infiltration. Well, remember Chairman Mao. If you study history, you will. Chairman Mao was an interesting leader of the Chinese. He claimed the ruling families and their clans were, well, as his own, if you will. The Chinese financial elite, some of which were executed under Chairman Mao, caused an exodus of many from places like Shanghai and other major cities. Well, British monarchy in the Hong Kong and Shanghai Bank, HSBC. Don't we see today the banking industry heavily involved in money laundering? Yes, we do. They're vehicles, as a matter of fact, for the current money laundering and the hiding of the gun running, the weapons running. Where do you think all this money that's coming into play, how is this all being laundered? Well, it's being laundered through banks that are outside of the purview of congressional oversight. I mean, it's all part of the Fed. When I bring in the Fed, of course, we're talking about an autonomous entity. This is just merely a spider web, a very twisted, convoluted trail of breadcrumbs and yarn, a ball of yarn that encompasses the financial, the military, the spying sectors, all of this together. And we are pushing Saudi Arabia by our actions directly into the arms of the Chinese, who have already built this infrastructure in this country for this very purpose. They, of course, have planned for this for decades. And William Rockefeller Clinton, I say that sarcastically, has assisted in this building of this Chinese infrastructure in America. So when we read, to tie this all together, when we read things like the elite going into their bunkers, we'll say under the Denver International Airport, understand that that's just one of many. The Denver Airport is just one of many. Don't forget, as we're likely to do, about the airports, the structures, the warehouses, not just in Denver, but in Arkansas. In every logistical or every city where the Rockefellers have a presence. And, of course, understand that the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds both own entire states, as I alluded to or referenced initially. The states like Arkansas, West Virginia, that have big land masses and small populations, they're buying their way, they're buying their power through the money that they've made. They're taking over the states and using the states as beachheads here in America. Now, I reference this, I'll just quickly mention this. I referenced about human trafficking, human body parts. You know that the Rockefellers are very philanthropic. It's interesting that there are, if you look at this, and I'm not going to get too far into this, if you look at the hospitals that are associated with the Rockefellers, this network of hospitals, perhaps as a homework assignment on your own, you can check into the system of hospitals that have Rockefeller control. You've got to go back into the early 20th century. In fact, I would suggest reading anything by Ida Tarbell about the Rockefeller fortune and how they made their money. Their fortune was founded on murders and bombings, of course, and as they like to finance both sides or all sides of a conflict. Boy, imagine owning a hospital or system of hospitals where you can profit from war, you can profit from violence, you can profit from sickness, illness. Well, part and parcel to that, you will find trafficking in body parts. Now, you might think, well, come on, this is crazy. Well, if you understand that the Rockefeller family did business with the Nazis during World War II, as did Prescott Bush and others, much to the detriment of the Americans, much to the detriment of the soldiers, to our detriment today, you'll understand that this whole process, not only is the sides funded, the front, the war parts funded by all sides, by the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds, but you also find out that the health care is also funded by the very same people, or the system of hospitals, the infrastructure, the healthcare infrastructure is also financed and held by the ruling elite. And this, right up into the 21st century, was that way. But if you look at, for example, places like the University of Chicago, in other hospitals, other healthcare centers, other locations, and if you look at what's going on with the organ transplant donor pool, who controls that, and where does some of that come from? Now, I don't want to get too far out in the weeds here, but you've got to understand that. Well, I'll just say this: back in January of 2000, there was a story in the South China Sunday Morning Post, and I think it's online if you can find it, where there were the allegations that China was actually harvesting human organs from political prisoners for use only in China, yet those people with money would use the infrastructure, the healthcare system that was built in all throughout the country, or all throughout the world, all throughout the world, to sell these organs. Think of this. In the South China Sunday Morning Post, this from January 9th, 2000, there was an allegation that the Southern Chinese hospital was selling livers from executed prisoners to wealthy Asian transport patients, in some of the body parts were shipped into, well, perhaps this country. And how were they shipped? I'll just let that question hang right there. In fact, there was references to pagan type of worship, where a lot of the organs were shipped before, well, certain dates like the Lunar New Year, allegedly. And there were allegations where, well, if you miss that window, that specific window, you'll have to wait until another specific window, like Labor Day, for example. And there was, if you look closely, you'll find a very big controversy surrounding the hospital, the healthcare, the infrastructure held by the Rockefellers, tied to the Chinese with body parts. By the way, I'll just throw this out here, and you can do with it what you will. The Rockefellers University of Chicago hospitals back in the 1990s, early 2000s, early turn of the century, they had the largest transplant center for human body parts in Illinois, if not the entire United States. In fact, 30% of liver transplant patients were from out of state, and about a third more kidney and pancreas transplant patients were from out of state, coming to the University of Chicago hospitals. The donor pool from University of Chicago, they perform more transplants than any other hospital in the state. In 1998, they performed 288 procedures, more than 22% of all transplants in Illinois, 78 liver transplants. Now, that's according to the numbers back in 1990, cited in Chicago Business publication in March of 2000. The newspaper pointed out that a liver transplant at that time cost, well, a little over $250,000. But the issue here is the Rockefeller's hospitals are reportedly a center for the human body, or center for the human body parts from China, supervised by who? The Red Chinese Secret Police in the United States. The whole procedure is extremely covert, clandestine. You will not hear about this in the primary media. Why did I mention all of that? Well, you've got to understand that this is business, as is the human slave trade. And when you get into that, the human slave trade and the organ transplants, what else is attached to that? Bohemian Grove. Does that now make a little bit more sense to you? When we talk about the Bohemian Grove, the cremation care ceremonies and all of that, the worship to a pagan god at these ceremonies, where all of these players, these big politicians like the Bushes and the Clintons and all these people that go there, and whoever else goes there to worship, what's really going on? Well, it's a ritualistic pagan ceremony, of course, celebrating their god. Well, behind it all behind it all is the war in the heavens that Steve Quayle talks about and Russ Dizdar and others talk about, because this is the spiritual aspect as well. You've got the infrastructure built. You've got, when I say the infrastructure, you've got the logistics hub, the transportation hubs, the centers, that also serve not only as the incoming and outgoing locations for arms and other things perhaps coming in and out of the United States, but you also have shelters being built, much like, or underground bunkers being built, much like under the Denver airport. You've also have safe houses, or you've got multi-use for these facilities. We talk about, for example, FEMA, these FEMA camps. Well, are we not seeing the potential to use, are we not hearing about the potential to use stadiums and even private locations like malls, or perhaps even large warehouse-type stores in a pinch as FEMA camps, detention centers, or relocation centers? What we're seeing is right in front of our noses for the last few decades. This whole process of establishing this network of transportation, this infrastructure, this much like the shadow government we have this infrastructure being built right in front of us that will be used when everything falls apart. You will see that it's not a big leap between where we were to where we needed to be, or where they needed us to be, because everything has been built right in front of our eyes. Just like the Denver airport. Just like the underground structures at the Denver airport were constructed right under everyone's noses without question, so too have all of these other structures been constructed. For what use and to what end? Well, you've got the bunkers, you've got the special areas for the elite, the people in power, the powerful of the powerful, and their politician lackeys to go to in the event of chaos. You've got the network, the infrastructure to foment the chaos through weapons and drugs shipments. You've got the same structures being used to deal with foreign entities like the Chinese. Then you've got the Clintons. You've got, we'll just stay with the Clintons for a second. You've got them who are under the control of the Rockefellers, who are shaping foreign policy, and through the actions, and have been laying the foundation for foreign policy right in front of us, with respect to her being Hillary Clinton being Secretary of State. Now behind the scenes, shaping foreign policy to push, for example, the Saudis into the arms of the Chinese, which Bill Clinton, on behalf of the Rockefellers, and him being a Rockefeller himself, set up during the decades of the 90s when he was actually as president, and also before that as governor of Arkansas. You see, this did not happen overnight. None of this happened overnight. Now, if you step back even further as I wrap this up and look at things, look at the current state of affairs here in the United States, look at what the talk is. Look at the postings, like I said, the Facebook postings from the Christian American Patriots Militia. Look at what they're talking about. Obama has got to go. We can kill Obama. That's what they're saying. And and I do believe that there's a danger when this happens. Who is going to take the fall for this? The Christians, because built into this whole process, built into this carefully integrated, carefully overlapped, carefully overlaid, bizarre, and I realize it's bizarre, but very carefully crafted network that has been being built for the last half century. built into this antagonism toward Christianity? Is this antagonism toward anything that has to do with the Judeo-Christian faith? They have to vilify Christians. They've already got the network established. They've got the people in place. They've got everything ready to go. They've got the foreign policy shaped. This is why this Iran thing is so important, but no one is really touching on why it's important. It's important because this is the final roll of the dice on the craps table that is the world that will determine the time when we, the United States, will be relegated to the corner of the room, rendered impotent, subjugated to China, subjugated essentially as well to Russia. And I didn't get into that tonight, but China was the main focus. But China, as I pointed out, using the assets already in place by the traitors, by the seditious people who have been in power right under our noses, and we have given that power to them, and we've watched them do it. And you know something? No one has, very few, I should say, no, I don't mean no one, but very few have actually connected the dots and said, wait a minute, none of this makes sense. This is actually a part of a larger scheme. NAFTA. We talk about that. NAFTA, it's part of a larger scheme. Do you think that Clinton didn't know what he was doing when he signed the various trade bills and also the various acts that got rid of Glass-Steagall, putting the dollar at risk? Of course he did. So did the congressmen and senators. So did our legislator. So you see, I guess what I'm getting at here is this: we are being set up for a huge fall, internationally and domestically. Internationally, through the Iranian deal, and this is also going to be ushering in the killing of the dollar, because we're going to lose our world reserve currency status, plus the oil is going to be traded for gold-backed currency or baskets of currencies rather than the U.S. dollar. So what's that going to do to us? We are going to be impotent. And you know what? Just like General Patton's army, when Patton was advancing in North Africa, what happened? He ran out of gas. He couldn't advance because he had no gas to advance to go into Berlin. He could have been in Berlin in a few days, but guess what? We, the political hacks here in D.C., cut off the gas supply and gave the gas instead to Great Britain, or the British general. Same scenario. We are going to be cut off. Our supplies are going to be cut off. And in fact, this is a culmination of a half a century or more of planning, at least in the more current scenario. Wow. I can't believe 3 hours went by so quickly. Folks, I want to thank you again for joining me tonight and staying with me tonight on this Thanksgiving evening. And please, folks, pray for Barack Hussein Obama. Pray for our leadership, because I do see some bad things coming. If we cannot be allowed to be anywhere connected toward any violence or any threats of violence to Obama, regardless of his crimes and his seditious activity, his traitorous activity. We must not allow